Good morning, dear students. Myself Babida Matthew. Today I am going to discuss about the topic hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. It's a very important topic. Hypertension is one of the most common complications during pregnancy. Increased maternal and perinatal morbidity and mortality. It is a sign of an underlying pathology that may be pre-existing or appears for the first time during pregnancy. That's why it is also called as toxemia in pregnancy. We can see about the definition of hypertension. Hypertension is defined as blood pressure measurement of more than or equal to 140 by 90 mm of Hg, or rise of 30 mm of Hg, or more in systolic pressure, or 15 mm of Hg in diastolic blood pressure over the pre or early pregnancy level. So, sum up, hypertension is when the blood pressure is increased more than 140 but 90 mm of Hg, or the systolic raises 30 mm of Hg or more, or diastolic is 15 mm of Hg or more for pre or early pregnancy level. That's known as hypertension during pregnancy. We can see the classification. First is gestational hypertension. When blood pressure is more or equal to 140 by 90 mm of Hg for the first time in the pregnancy after 20th week of pregnancy without proteinuria, it is known as gestational hypertension. So, BP only rises more than or equal to 140 by 90, and it is usually occurs after 20th week without any proteinuria. Next is preeclampsia, or it is known as gestational hypertension. It is usually occurs with this hypertension is more than 140 by 90 mm of Hg with proteinuria. Next is eclampsia. Woman with the preeclampsia complicated with convulsion and or coma. So that is known as eclampsia. So she may be having the preeclampsia and it is complicated with convulsion and coma. It is the eclampsia. Next is chronic hypertension. Non-hypertension, she may be having the hypertension before pregnancy, or hypertension diagnosed first time before 20th week of pregnancy is known as chronic hypertension. Next is superimposed preeclampsia or eclampsia. It is she has non-hypertension before pregnancy or hypertension diagnosed first time before 20th week of pregnancy. Occurrence of new onset of proteinuria in the woman with chronic hypertension. It is known as superimposed preeclampsia and or eclampsia. We can see the criteria for diagnosis of superimposed preeclampsia. So that are new onset of proteinuria, that is more than 0.5 gram in 24 hours specimen. Aggravation of hypertension, thrombocytopenia or rise in the liver enzyme. These are the criteria for the superimposed preeclampsia. Now we can discuss about the preeclampsia. So for the definition, preeclampsia is a multi-system disorder of unknown etiology. It is characterized by development of hypertension to the extent of 140 by 90 mm of Hg or more with proteinuria after the 20th week in a previously normative and non-proteinuric woman. That means she don't have hypertension before and she don't have proteinuria before, but it has diagnosed during the pregnancy. That is hypertension and proteinuria. That is characterized or shown after 20th week of pregnancy is known as preeclampsia. So we can see the preeclampsia in detail. So in that, firstly, pregnancy induced hypertension, PIH. It is defined as hypertension that develops as a direct result of the gravid uterus. So because of the gravid uterus effect, the hypertension occurs, that is known as pregnancy-induced hypertension. It can be classified as gestational hypertension, preeclampsia and eclampsia. So we can see the risk factors of preeclampsia. First is genetic factors that include family history of any preeclampsia. Second is obstetrical factors, that is exposure to chorionic villi for the first time or increased chorionic villi that causes the obstetric factors, that is primary parity. So first time in the chorionic villi exposure. So that is primary parity, increased maternal age, previous history of preeclampsia, new paternity, the first paternity, and limited sperm exposure, that is known as sperm donation if the pregnancy occurred due to sperm donation, multiple pregnancy, hydrops fetalis with a large placenta, had activity for mole and triploidy. Next we can see the word medical factors that causes preeclampsia. That is first chronic hypertension, diabetics, obesity, that is more than 35 kg, and also she is insulin resistance, and renal disease, anti-phospholipid syndrome and inherited thrombophilias, and SLE, that is erythematosis, and PCOD, polycystic ovarian syndrome disease, hyperhomocythemia. Okay, then chronic infections, low socioeconomic status and environmental factor. These are the medical factors include or cause the preeclampsia. Next we can see diagnostic criteria of preeclampsia. How can we diagnose it as the preeclampsia? Prediction of preeclampsia is first is hypertension, an absolute raise of blood pressure for at least 140/90 of mmHg. So we can see how it can be calculated. Calculation based on a mean arterial pressure as advocated by the PA. That is systolic pressure plus diastolic into 2 by 3 is the mean arterial pressure. A rise of 20 mm of Hg of mean arterial pressure over the previous reading. So previous reading is measured and second time when it is measured. So when the second time it is measured, if it is raised more than 20 mm of Hg from the previous reading, or when the MAP is 105 or 105 mm of Hg or more, should be considered as significant. The rise of blood pressure should be equivalent at least on 2 occasions, at least 6 hours apart. So when we are checking the blood pressure 2 times with the 6 hours apart, if it is same, so we can see or we can say it as hypertension. Next, edema will be there. So edema, demonstration of pitting edema over the ankles after 12 hours bed rest, or rapid gain in weight of 1 IB a week or more than 5 IB a month, that is known as edema. So that can be confirmed as edema. This is so the edema is usually when pitting edema is in the ankles after the after patient is taking rest also there is edema, that means it is a preeclampsia. Then is the proteinuria. The presence of at least 2 random clean catch urine samples tested more than 4 hours apart in the absence of urinary tract infection is considered as significant. And also it is say that she is having proteinuria. So that is a 2 time, that is 4 hours apart, 2 time when we check. If it is more than this value is known as proteinuria. The test for proteinuria by multiple reagent strip dipstick as follows, that is trace 0.1 gram per liter and 1 plus is 0.3 gram, per liter, 2 plus, that is 1.0 gram per liter, and 3 plus is 3.0 gram per liter, and 4 plus, that is 10.0 gram liter. So these are the values considering and the according to the traced by the strip value. Next is the etiopathogenesis of preeclampsia. It is very important. Most time it will ask in the examination. So we can see in the normal pregnancy what will happen. Then we can see the changes in the condition of preeclampsia. In normal pregnancy, the angiotensin II is destroyed by angiotensinase, which is liberated from the placenta. So the angiotensin is liberated from the placenta. It is so angiotensin is destroyed by angiotensinase if it is liberated from the placenta. So angiotensinase is liberated from the placenta. It will destroy the angiotensin II. Like that, the blood pressure is stabilized in normal pregnancy. So normal pregnancy, there will not be having any hypertension. Then the second mechanism, the vascular system becomes refractory to the angiotensin II. This is made due to the vascular synthesis of prostaglandin I2 and nitric oxide, which have got vasodilator effect. So there is vasodilation, there is no blood pressure. But in interaction between the two systems stabilizes the blood pressure in normal pregnancy. So these two systems stabilizes the normal pregnancy blood pressure. But what will happen in preeclampsia? In preeclampsia, we already told the hypertension, proteinuria and edema. So why it is happening in the preeclampsia? In preeclampsia, first hypertension. It is because of imbalance in different components of prostaglandin. So first is the imbalance in different components of prostaglandin. That is deficiency of vasodilator. So when the vasodilator deficiency, what will happen? Vasoconstriction occur. So deficiency of vasodilator prostaglandin I2 from vascular endothelium and increased synthesis of thromboxane, a potent vasoconstrictor in platelets. So in the platelet, the thromboxane, this increases synthesis happens. That's why the vasoconstricting or vasoconstrictor occurs. So because of these prostaglandin components difference. So this is increased synthesis happens of thromboxane and the deficiency of vasodilator of prostaglandin deficiency and thromboxane increased synthesis. Because of two factors, that's what happen, is a vasoconstriction occur. Second, there is increased vascular sensitivity to the predecessor agent angiotensin II. That is, angiotensinase activity is depressed, followed by the proteinuria with elimination of alpha-2 globin. So angiotensinase activity depressed. That's why what happened? Proteinuria and the elimination of alpha-2 globin happens. Then third, nitric oxide, that deficiency happens. So that is a deficiency. We already told, because of nitric oxide the blood pressure is stabilizes. Okay, so when the deficiency of nitric oxide contribute to the development of hypertension, so vasoconstriction occur and also the hypertension occurs. So these three, again there is a points. So the fourth one, endothelin 1 is synthesized by endothelial cells and it is a potent vasoconstrictor compared to angiotensin II. So this is also a vasoconstrictor. Okay, so when it is synthesized by the endothelial cell, what will happen? Vasodilation, vasoconstriction occur. Okay, so that's why when the vasoconstriction occur, what will happen? Normally hypertension occur. Next, inflammatory mediators, that is cytokines. That is it is a tumor necrosis factor. Okay, cytokines, and second is interleukins. So these are the two inflammatory mediators. are derived from the activated leukocyte causes endothelial injury. So that is also when the endothelial injury occurs, what will happen? Again, the vasoconstriction occur and the hypertension occur. Then abnormal lipid metabolism. It results in more oxidative stress. Okay, so that is lipid peroxides, reactive oxygen species, and superoxide onion radicals, and these all causes endothelial injury and dysfunction. That is abnormal lipid metabolism also causes the what? Vasoconstriction, that is endothelial injury, and that's furtherly leads to the vasoconstriction. Next, imbalance of angiogenic and anti-angiogenic proteins in the placental vascular bed. So there may be imbalance, that is soluble FMS like thyroxine kinase 1 and soluble endoxin is endoglin. So these two factors, there is a imbalance, so that also causes hypertension. And others, the final thing is others, that is a mutation of factor 5 lead increases all the risk of hypertension. So these are the etiopathogenesis of hypertension by preeclampsia. So we can see how the preeclampsia occurs because of all these factors. So preeclampsia is because of all these factors. Preeclampsia is endothelial dysfunction and vasospasm. So endothelial dysfunction is due to oxidative stress and inflammatory mediators. We already told what are the factors. Then vasospasm results from the imbalance of vasoconstrictors, angiotensin 2 and TXA2, endothelin 1, and vasodilators, that is the prostaglandin I2 and nitric oxide. So because of all these factors, hypertension occurs. Next is the edema. Increased oxidative stress that causes endothelial injury and increased capillary permeability and furtherly leads to edema. Next is the proteinuria. So it is a spasm of afferent glomerular arteries, causes anoxic change in the endothelium of the glomerular tuft that leads to glomerular endotheliosis that causes increases capillary and increased leakage of proteins. Then that furtherly leads to tubular reabsorption is simultaneously depressed. So albumin constituents 50% to 60% and alpha globulin constituents 10 to 15% of total protein excreted in the urine. So because of this, there is a proteinuria. Next, we can see how the Doppler ultrasound finding shows. So high resistance index in the second trimester with a 6-fold increase in the rate of preeclampsia and presence of diastolic notch, that is at 24th week of gestation by Doppler velocimetry in the uterine artery can possible development of preeclampsia. Then reverse diastolic flow pattern in the umbilical artery usually indicates poor perinatal outcome. Then fetal DHA, that is free fetal DHA in maternal serum in early pregnancy may be predictive of preeclampsia. Next, we can see the pathogenesis of preeclampsia. So we already told there is a predisposition of diabetes, parity, hypertension that leads to failure of conversion of spiral artery to the vascular site. That leads to plasma ischemia. Then what will happen? That is plasma produces thromboplastin causing the IC disseminated intravascular coagulation and renin causing vasoconstriction. That causes poor renal perfusion, hypertension, proteinuria and edema. If untreated, poor renal perfusion occurs, hypertension, proteinuria, edema and causes eclampsia. And when the placental poor renal reflection, hypertension, proteinuria and edema, that causes preeclampsia. Then pathology, pathophysiology. So uteroplacental bed. We already just now explained uteroplacental bed, premature aging of the placenta, and occasional acute renal influx and white influx are visible on the maternal surface of the placenta. What will happen in the villi? Villi syncytial degeneration and increase syncytial nodes and mark the proliferation of syncytial trophoblasts and thickening of the basement layer and proliferating end arthritis and are evident in varying degrees. So these are the changes occurring in uteroplacental bed and villi. But in preeclampsia, the normal endovascular invasion of the cytotrophoblast into the spiral arteries fails to occur beyond decidual myometrial junction. So it will the endovascular invasion of the cytoplast into the spiral artery that is failed to occur, that is beyond the decidual myometrial junctions. As a result, what will happen? The musculoelastic medium in the myometrial segment remains responsive to vasoconstrictor stimuli, resulting in the decreased blood flow. This is acute arthrosis of spiral arteries with the obliteration of the lumen occur. Then what will happen? Intravillous circulation. The blood flow is impaired to the extent of about 1/3. Secondary to the changes in the maternal blood vessels, this results in placental change, anatomical and functional, which are responsible for fetal geopathy. So when the intravillous circulation become decreased, that will be cause the anatomical and functional changes, and the fetal become geopathy. Next we can see the changes in the kidney. The glomerulus which become enlarged, that is glomerular endotheliosis will happen, and endothelial cells swells up and fibrin-like deposits occur on the basement membrane. The lumen may be occluded, that is occluded means it will become blocked, and interstitial cells in between the capillaries proliferate. The spasm of the afferent glomerular arteries happens, and due to anoxia. So when the capillaries become proliferate and the spasm of glomerular arterioles will occur, that cause anoxia. Due to anoxia, patchy areas of damage of the tubular epithelium occurs, and the final effects are reduced renal blood flow and glomerular filtration and impaired tubular reabsorption and secretion function. That is occurring due to preeclampsia in the kidney. Next, in the blood vessel, there is an increased or intense vasospasm, and circulation in the vasorium is impaired and damage of the vascular walls, and that causes endothelial injury. Then the liver. Periportal hemorrhage, necrosis of the liver occurs due to thrombosis of the arterioles, and maybe capsular hemorrhage, that causes the capsular hemorrhage. Next we can see the eyes. Visual disturbance due to edema in the occipital lobe and localized retinal vasospasm and hemorrhages and papilledema, blindness rarely due to the retinal detachment. So these are the changes or problems occur in the eyes. Next is the central cardiovascular system. There is reduced plasma volume and hemoconcentration, increased sensitivity to angiotensin II, CVP and pulmonary wedge pressure are increased. So these are the changes of the CNS. And blood coagulation, isolated thrombocytopenia, blood viscosity and hemoconcentration can be seen, DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation may develop, and fibrogen levels are increased, and factor 7 clotting factor is reduced. An increased consumption of factor 8 in preeclampsia occur, and plasma and antithrombin 3 is decreased in severe condition, and that's why blood coagulation is disturbed and isolated thrombocytopenia occur. Next is in the respiratory system. Pulmonary edema, scattered alveolar and hemorrhage in the lungs usually occur. Next, we can see one of the problem is the HELL. Because of this problem, HELLP syndrome occurs. So HELL, what is HELLP syndrome? H means hemolysis. EL means elevated liver enzyme. And LP means low platelet. That is the HELLP syndrome. Okay, low platelet means less than 1 lakh. So these three factors is there, that is known as the HELLP syndrome. Okay, this is a rare complication of preeclampsia. It may develop even without maternal hypertension. So signs and symptoms are nausea, vomiting, epigastric or right upper quadrant pain, along with the biochemical and hematological changes, and parenchymal necrosis of the liver causes the elevation of hepatic enzymes and bilirubin. There may be subcapsular hematoma formation. These are because of the parenchymal necrosis of the liver. These changes occur. Then abnormal peripheral blood smear can be seen, and eventually liver may rupture to cause sudden hypertension due to hemoperitoneum. So when the liver is there, may be a chance of rupture. So if it rupture, there is a hemo, means blood collection in the peritoneal cavity occurs. Then what are the management of the management can do in the preeclampsia and eclampsia? That is the we can do the anti-seizure management. Prophylaxis with the magnesium sulfate can be started. That is anti-seizure management is the prophylaxis with the magnesium sulfate can be started. And careful assessment of maternal and fetal status followed by delivery can be done. The administration of corticosteroids improve the perinatal, that is increase pulmonary maturity, decrease IVH, and decrease necrotizing enterocolitis. And maternal, what happened? It is increase the thrombocyte count and increase urinary output. These are outcomes. So when the administration of corticosteroids is advised or given, that is helps in the perinatal and maternal outcome. Then cesarean section is a common mode of delivery. Then epidural anesthesia can be used safely if the platelet count is more than 1 lakh. Then platelet transfusion should be given if the count is less than 50,000. And patients should be managed in ICU until there is an improvement in platelet count, urine output, BP, and liver enzymes. This is the management we are done for the HELLP syndrome. This is same as the preeclampsia and eclampsia. Next is the expectant management. We can give the selectively when the pregnancy is less than 34 weeks with the we can give the bed rest, plasma volume expansion that can be infused of 5 to 25% of albumin, antithrombotic agents, that is dipyridamole, immunosuppressive agents like steroids and other fresh frozen plasma can be given. This is expected management. This is for the HELLP syndrome. The complications are maternal apressia placenta, DIC, acute renal failure, severe ascites, pulmonary edema, pleural effusion, cerebral edema, laryngeal edema, retinal detachment, subcapsular liver hematoma, ARDS, sepsis, and the death. These are the complications for the mother by the HELLP syndrome. Next, perinatal morbidity and mortality are significantly increased, and this is due to the preterm delivery and prematurity, respiratory distress syndrome, and sepsis. So next we can see the changes in the heart. That is, subendothelial hemorrhage may occur. That is, buccal necrosis and hemorrhage in the myocardium may affect the conducting system, leading to heart failure. Next, lungs. There is evidence of edema or hemorrhagic bronchopneumonia, and this is due to low oncotic pressure and leaky capillaries. That's why there is a capillary leakage and low oncotic pressure. There is such evidence of edema and hemorrhage and bronchopneumonia occur in the lungs. In other organs, adrenal glands show hemorrhagic and necrosis. Stomach shows features of hemorrhage, gastritis. Then water and electrolyte balance. There is a lot of controversy and confusion about the changes in the water and electrolyte balance in preeclampsia, and immediately following the delivery there is a rapid mobilization of sodium and water from the extravascular component to the intravascular space. So if this mechanism fails, the patient may develop shock. Otherwise, it is a normal replacement or the stabilizing activity. Next is hematological changes. Blood value. The extent of increase in the blood volume in normal pregnancy is not evident in severe preeclampsia due to the vasospastic stage. The intravascular fluid is forced out into the extravascular space. Thus, there is a hemoconcentration with increased hematocrit value. Next is in the blood value, hematological value, that is erythrocyte destruction occurs. There is evidence of increased erythrocyte destruction following eclampsia with resultant hemoglobinemia and hemoglobinuria is occur. So this is due to erythrocyte destruction. Next is in the coagulation, there is evidence of DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulopathy occur. These are the hematological changes. Next is the hormones. Hormones. There is a conflict regarding the hormonal status in preeclampsia. Estrogen and progesterone level are lowered, whereas chorionic gonadotropin levels may be increased. So prostaglandin and estrogen level usually lower, but in the chorionic gonadotropin level is increased. The serum level of HPL also decreases. This is hormonal changes due to preeclampsia. Then biochemical values. Non-protein nitrogen and urea levels of normal pregnancy of 25 mg per deciliter and 20 mg per deciliter respectively are maintained in the mild preeclampsia. But in severe preeclampsia, however, both levels are increased. Blood uric acid level is raised beyond the normal level of 4 mg per deciliter, and oxidative stress, also oxidative stress also occur, and hyperhomocysteine found in preeclampsia causes oxidative stress and endothelial damage. So that is about the biochemical values changes in the preeclampsia. Next we can see the clinical types of preeclampsia. It is classified into mild and severe. So in the mild preeclampsia, this includes cases of sustained raise of blood pressure of more than 140/90 mm of Hg but less than 160 mm of Hg. Systolic or 110 mm of Hg, diastolic without significant tone. This is the mild preeclampsia. So that in that only what happened, the blood pressure raises, okay, and there is a proteinuria. But in the severe case, a persistent systolic blood pressure of 160, more than 160 mm of Hg, of diastolic pressure of more than 110 mm of Hg, and protein excretion of more than 5 gram per 24 hours, and oliguria that is less than 400 ml per 24 hours, platelet count will become less than 1 lakh, then HELP syndrome, cerebral and visual disturbances, persistent severe epigastric pain, retinal hemorrhage exudates or papilledema, intrauterine growth restriction of the fetus, and pulmonary edema. This is the difference between the mild and severe preeclampsia symptoms. Next is the clinical features. Associated with obstetrical and medical complications such as multi-pregnancy, polyhydramnias, pre-existing hypertension, diabetes, etc. The clinical manifestation appears usually after the 28th week. Mild symptoms are a slight swelling over the ankles, which persists or raising from the bed in the morning, or tightness of the ring finger. So swelling usually occurs in the early morning can be seen, and ring finger will become tight. And edema, that is face, abdomen, vulva, and even the whole body. You can see from this is a pitching edema, this is a vulval edema. Next is the alarming signs, that is headache, either located over the occipital or the frontal region, and disturbed sleeping pattern, diminished urinary output, that is urinary output is less than 400 ml in 24 hours is very ominous. And epigastric pain, that is acute pain in the epigastric region associated with vomiting, at times coffee color, is due to the hemorrhagic gastritis or due to the subcapsular hemorrhage in the liver. Then eye symptoms are blurring, scotomata, diminish of vision, or at times complete blindness, occipital lobe damage, or retinal detachment. Next are the signs. There may be abnormal weight gain, rise of blood pressure, edema, pulmonary edema. Abdominal examination shows chronic placental insufficiency, such as scanty liquid or growth retardation of the fetus. These are the signs. Next to the investigation. Urine examination, we can see the proteinuria. You already explained in previously. So proteinuria is the last feature of preeclampsia to appear. It may be trace or at times copious, so that the urine becomes solid or boiling. That is 10 to 15 gram per liter. There may be few highly cast endoepithelial cast, or even few red cells can be shown. C. And 24 hours urine collection for the protein measurement also can be done. Then ophthalmoscopy examination in severe cases, retinal edema and constriction of the arterioles can be seen, and alteration of normal ratio vein and arteriole diameter from 3:2 to 3:1, and nicking of the veins were crossing by the arterioles. There may be hemorrhage. Next, in the blood value, a serum uric acid level is more than 4.5 mg per deciliter. Blood urea level remains normal or sometimes slightly raised. And serum creatinine level may be more than 1 mg per deciliter, and thrombocytopenia and abnormal coagulation profile of varying degree. And hepatic enzyme level may be increased. Antenatal fetal monitoring should be done, that is daily fetal kick count. Fetal kick count means how many times fetus is kicked. This is also monitoring by the morning, noon and evening. Okay. And ultrasonography for fetal growth and liquor pockets, that is to measure any oligohydramnias or polyhydramnias. And cardiotopography should be done. Umbilical artery flow velocimetry and biophysical profile, we have to check for any vessels that is umbilical vessel, any obstructions is there or not. Okay. Next is the management. So management objectives are to stabilize hypertension, to prevent its progression to severe preeclampsia. If it is a mild hypertension, we can prevent from severe preeclampsia. Then prevent the complication of this preeclampsia or hypertension complication we can be to prevent the eclampsia, delivery of the healthy baby in optimal time, and restoration of the health of the mother in pregnancy. So these are the objectives of the management. So what all the management can be done? So first, admission in hospital, and maternal BP, weight, urine protein and fetal conditions such as DFMC, fetal movement, daily fetal movement count, USC, NST, deep biophysical profile, Doppler should be monitored carefully. And high protein diets, that is 100 gram. Daily total calorie, that is 1600 calorie per day. The sodium intake should be moderate, not exceed 6 gram per day. And rest in left lateral position. And once a patient completed 37 weeks of gestation, delivery can be allowed. In severe preeclampsia, pregnancy more than or equal to 34 weeks of gestation, we can do the termination of pregnancy as fetal outcome is good. and dexamethasone can be given. That is, or that dexamethasone or betamethasone is a corticosteroid to improve the or to promote the lung maturity and stabilize the BP and induce the induction of labor can be done if there is a severe preeclampsia and patient is completed 34 weeks or more, we can do the induction of labor. Then, if the pregnancy is less than 28 weeks of gestation, continuation of pregnancy and can give the corticosteroids and stabilize the BP and induce the labor. If the pregnancy is between 28 to 34 weeks, we can provide bed rest, diet high in proteins, moderate sodium, right? Then anticonvulsants, that is magnesium sulfate, can be administered, and corticosteroids, dexamethasone, should be provided for the lung maturity, and fluid and electrolyte replacement, that is by the eye fluid starter, then urinary should be measured, that is that because there may be renal connection, that's why we have to check for the oliguria. Then antihypertensive, that is methyl dopa, levetiracetam and hydralazine can be given. So this is the pregnancy between 28 to 34 weeks, high protein, anticonvulsant, corticosteroids, fluid and electrolyte replacement, and antihypertensive. With that, we have to provide the bed rest to improve the weeks. Then during labor, close monitoring of the labor, that is fetal heart rate, fetal activity should be monitored. Then induction by oxytocin infusion, pump induction of labor by the oxytocin infusion can be started. The application of forceps to cut short the second stage. So in the second stage, there may be blood pressure variation and patient is pushed or patient make a strong condition for delivery. There may be chance of eclampsia. That's why we can cut short the second stage by the use of forceps. And blood should be due and cross matched and kept steady for any need. And childbirth in Sims position can be provided. And oxygen is administered. And prevention of PPH, oxytocin 5 to 10 unit iron should be used. And IV ergometry preparations are avoided. It can worsen the hypotension. This sometimes asked. Okay, so IV ergometry can worsen the hypertension, so it should be avoided, but can be given the oxytocin. Then in the postpartum period, close monitoring for the first 24 hours because hypertension, there is chance of eclampsia. So antihypertensive drug treatment should be continued if the BP is high, systolic is more than 150 mm of Hg or diastolic is more than 100 mm of Hg. And oral nifedipine 10 mg at every 6 hours is given until the BP remains below the hypotensive level for at least 48 hours. And oral furosemide to increase the urine output 20 mg a day for 5 days is also found to improve the recovery and to reduce the need of antihypertensive drugs in severe preeclampsia. It can be reduce the edema. The magnesium sulfate and antihypertensive drugs may be needed in women with severe hypertension and symptoms of acute feminine preeclampsia. The patient is to be kept in the hospital till the blood pressure is brought down to a safe level and proteinuria disappears. It's a postpartum period management. Next we can see the complication of preeclampsia. So immediate complication for the maternal during pregnancy, there is a chance of eclampsia more acute than in subacute cases. The accidental hemorrhage, oliguria and anuria, and oliguria is less than 200 ml anuria in absence of urine, and diminution of vision and even blindness. And preterm labor, HELLP syndrome, cerebral hemorrhage, acute respiratory distress syndrome. This can be occur for the mother during pregnancy. And during labor for the mother, eclampsia, postpartum hemorrhage may be related to coagulation failure. Then in the prepurium, eclampsia usually occurs within 48 hours. That is, next is shock. So eclampsia occur in the prepurium and can be cause shock. That is, prepurial vasomotor collapse is associated with the reduced concentration of sodium and chloride due to the sudden fall in the corticosteroidal level, there may be chance of shock. So should be monitored. Then sepsis due to increased incidence of induction operative interference. We introduced the forceps or vacuum we used to reduce the second stage of labor. So that's why there is chance of sepsis and low vitality. So that's why this is also one of the complications. Next, now we discuss about the maternal. So next is that's also immediate. Next is the fetal intrauterine death due to the spasm of the uteroplasmal circulation leading to accidental hemorrhage or acute red infection. There is a chance of intrauterine death. Then intrauterine growth restriction due to the chronic placental insufficiency. Then asphyxia. Then prematurity, either due to spontaneous preterm onset of labor or due to preterm. Then remote complication. Next is the remote complication, that is residual hypertension, recurrent preeclampsia, preeclampsia, chronic renal disease and glomerulonephritis, and maternal mortality and perinatal mortality. So screening for tests for the prediction and prevention of preeclampsia, what all the things can be done. Doppler ultrasound in the second trimester, presence of diastolic notch in 24 hours gestation by the Doppler velocimetry in the uterine artery can predict the possible development of preeclampsia. Next, absence of end diastolic frequencies or reverse diastolic flow patterns in the umbilical artery usually indicates poor perinatal outcome. Then average mean arterial pressure in second trimester, if it is more than 90 mm of which may predict the onset. Then fetal DHA, that is detection of the free fetal DHA in the maternal serum in early pregnancy may be predictive of the preeclampsia. And rollover test, that is this screening test is done between 28 to 32 weeks. Blood pressure is measured with the patient on her side first, and then patient asked to roll on the back to the neck and the back to check the blood pressure once again. So we can check her BP in sideline position and straight line position. So you have to check that. An increase in 20 mg in diastolic pressure from side to back position indicate a positive rollover test. So if there is a change in both the values, that is 20 mg, that is a positive indicative of developing the preeclampsia. Then about 33% of women with positive rollover test developing hypertension later. Negative test is of no value. Next, prophylactic measures for prevention of preeclampsia. Regular antenatal checkup should be done for early detection of rapid gain in weight or a tendency of rising blood pressure, especially the diastolic one. So we have to go for the regular checkup. And antithrombotic agents, low dose of aspirin 60 mg daily beginning early in the pregnancy in potentially high risk patient can be done. So if the patient is high risk, you can start the antithrombotic agents, that is low dose of aspirin. Then heparin or low molecular weight heparin is useful in the woman with the thrombophilia and with high risk pregnancy. Then calcium supplementation, that is 2 grams per day, reduces the risk of gestational hypertension. Then antioxidants, that is vitamin E, vitamin C, and nutritional supplements with magnesium, zinc, fish oil, and low salt diet have been tried but are of limited benefit. And balanced diet rich in protein may be reduce the risk. So these are the prophylactic measures to prevent the preeclampsia. There is a regular antenatal checkup, antithrombolytic agent, heparin or low molecular weight heparin, or calcium supplementation, little value in the antioxidants, and balanced diet that is rich in protein. That's all about the preeclampsia. So till now we discussed about the preeclampsia, what is preeclampsia, hypertension in pregnancy, and different classification, what is the etiological factors of preeclampsia, what is the etiopathogenesis and pathophysiology, its symptoms and effects in the different system in our body, what is the management during pregnancy, labor and prepuberty, and what are the complications, and how can we prevent the preeclampsia? Can we detect early and prevent the complication? Thank you.